Welcome to the fourth Chiratae Women Trailblazer series. And joining me are Nithya Sudhir from Artium, a co-founder of Artium, and Akanksha from LoveLocal. She's a founder of LoveLocal. Welcome, Nithya. Welcome, Akanksha. Thanks for taking time to share your experiences with the audience. Maybe we can start with a few warm-up questions before we get into, the real meat of things. So, starting up itself is not a very, I would say, easy thing and not a very common thing in India. And that too for women entrepreneurs, if you see the number of percentage of women entrepreneurs is lower, right? So one of the questions that I want to ask both of you is that what's your earliest memory of thinking that you will become an entrepreneur? And also explain a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. How did you finally then end up starting up?
Nithya, do you want to go ahead? I'll follow your lead.
Sure. So, for me, being a leader has always been something that I looked forward to. And I also got an opportunity. So, like very early in my career, I had an opportunity to lead a successful profit and loss business. And coming from the background of finance, I understand profitability and I understand the importance of how to set up a business and go about it. So I think way back in 2003, though it was a P&L management that I was doing when I was in Bangalore, it sowed in that seed of entrepreneurship in my head way back because it involved you to think always in terms of what would be the next move to actually expand your business. And of course, that was the time when Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, I think 2005 was the time when she came out with Biocon's IPO. And being a woman entrepreneur, the kind of business that she had built, always inspired me in terms of, having to walk the path. And of course, there was the right opportunity that was always required to get into it. But I think this got sowed very early in my career that I wanted to be something, and I had to do by myself. So that is about my earlier memories of becoming an entrepreneur.
Akanksha?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I think the first time I was an accidental entrepreneur. I think what I knew I wanted to do is naively at a young age, I wanted to change the world and I wanted to make a difference. That was my objective. I ended up starting my first company at a young age, again, very much by accident at 20 with a group of friends in the US. And that was a happy accident because I learned through that business that we ended up building that, oh, you can build things that make a difference. And I think that was the turning point for me that, okay, rather than take a job, rather than take a more traditional route, I would like to build things that can change the world. And for me, that's why I'm building the business that I built today. And I personally would not be motivated to build businesses that don't have the potential to have a huge social impact or a huge impact on society, because that's what motivates me. And I think to your point, TCM, about, it's an unusual path in general and then specifically for women. And I do think two factors have played a major role here. One, I think my parents were very different. I have a brother as well. And I think, I'm very fortunate that my parents did not treat us differently in terms of gender, whether it was expectations or exposure. We were very much treated like equals. I think I have a high risk appetite, more risk appetite than I think sometimes my parents are happy with, but that's the truth. And I would say my dad is quite an adventurer and my mom has taken a lot of risk. Whether they realize it, I've observed them and that's increased my risk appetite. And I think the other thing is I am married, and I do think, the partner that you marry if you choose to get married, plays a big role also in your ability to pursue a less traditional path. And I think many very successful women have said this, that one of the most important decisions a woman can make in life if she chooses to get married is you have to select the right partner, because that will have a huge impact on the shape of the rest of your life. And I think that's the second place that, I've made good decisions, and I have an incredibly supportive partner who's just as excited about me building a business or me following my dreams as I am. So I think those two factors have led me into this position.
Akanksha, one interesting thing that you grew up outside India, you studied outside India, but you chose to do your startup in India, right? What made you to, come to India and do a startup, which is actually not that easy?
So I've been chasing the Indian dream. I know everyone talks about the American dream, but I believe in the Indian dream. And I know it sounds very naive, but I truly believe that. And I think, my parents, it's interesting. For my parents' generation, I don't think India was yet in a place where you could build as easily. They lived in an India, through the 70s, 80s, etc., pre-liberalization effectively. So it's interesting because my parents and that generation in many ways was looking to lead for economic opportunity. And I'm very lucky to be the generation in which post-liberalization, India has developed enough that the excitement is here. Actually, I'm not interested in being a small cog in a big machine. Like, I want to be part of building our country to making it one of the most successful nations in the world, which it was, frankly. 200 years before colonization, India was the dominant or one of the dominant economies. So a lot of also people talk about India emerging. I call it the re-emergence of India, and I want to play a role in that re-emergence. So I'm not enamored by the American dream. I believe in the Indian dream, and that's why I've come. And actually, my parents don't even live here, so I sometimes by default say I came back to India. But in some ways, I moved to India. Like, when I moved to Bombay, I had no family there. Like, I literally showed up in a city with a PowerPoint presentation with a dream that I wanted to be part of the India story. I had no friends there. I had no family there. Like, I came for the Indian dream, and I'm staying for the Indian dream.
No, that's amazing. I remember meeting you in the early days when you were talking to Chiratae, and that always something that I was quite intrigued about. Um, because, like you said, I think you moved to India. You didn't even come back to India, right? To do the startup. That's amazing. And so, Nithya, I think one of the interesting things that you have gone about is you went into P&L management, and then you like you said, I think you were born to a musical family, and but how has music helped you in your entrepreneurship journey?
So, so what we realized is, music is something which is deep, within us. Actually, as Indians, all of us have a creative inclination in life, but somewhere or the other, we have not been pursuing it. So, my understanding of music, because I am born to a mother who's a music teacher, uh, makes me understand what is it that is needed to structure the curriculum. So because Carnatic music is fairly structured in its approach, unlike the Hindustani style, which is a little more gharana based, a little more specific to those 6 or 7 gharanas that are there, and they all stick to their own legacy. So when we were looking at Artium, we wanted to create that kind of a structure for the entire spread of music, all the genres, all the styles that we have designed. We wanted to bring in structures because what we found is that it's a very fragmented market. Like my mother, there have been many people who are teaching from homes, but then they have not got anything which is a book, there in a book. So we wanted to create that kind of a curriculum which would be structured, and over a period of time, like I said, we would want to certify our curriculum so that we have something like a Trinity, which is based out of India, an Indian institute which certifies, and a body whose certificates are accepted by universities abroad, because today even Indian parents have to send their children to Trinity for getting the certifications, and then they use that for their university admissions abroad. So that is what we had in mind, and my understanding of music to a large extent helped me in discussing with the creative minds, because when we have to bring in structure, we speak to a lot of people who come with that kind of an experience and expertise in designing curriculum. So that helped me actually visualize this whole thing, and we were able to put it across in a better manner, because again, when we were dealing with creative people, they came with their own you know uh, gharanas. They came from their own gharanas, so getting them to understand the structure and how is it that we could bring it was something which we had to work upon, which we did.
And you got the lucky and happy amalgamation of your passion for music and your entrepreneurship also in the same field, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Very fortunate.
yeah. So it never feels like work.
It is not, because it's a joy for me, because this I always felt was my calling. In fact, during my MBA, of course, I did my MBA from SPJMR when I was a mother to a 4-year-old, because since I had not completed my chartered accountancy, I always wanted to do complete my post graduation. So I did it from SPJ in Bombay. And so there as well, we used to have these musical sessions, and I used to be a forerunner there actually. In terms of lending my voice to a lot of sessions that we used to have at the institute. So it's a joy for me.
Akanksha, you're a international sports person, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that you can draw parallels with entrepreneurship journey. So can you share what are your learnings from there that are helping you in your entrepreneurship journey?
Awesome. So TCM, honestly, I think my sports journey is one of the biggest things I've taken lessons into how to be a good entrepreneur, pretty much in every aspect. But if I was to synthesize it into a few headlines, I think first and foremost, sports teaches you discipline. You have to wake up in the morning, irrespective of whether you're injured, whether you lost the previous day. It doesn't matter. You show up, because the ones who show up are the only ones who can achieve like greatness and excellence. I think the other thing is to be a great athlete, you have to have incredible work ethic and incredible patience, because you don't learn things overnight, right? You learn them through incredible repetition. I will probably have hit a squash ball. Like, I've easily done more than 10,000 hours. I have done hours and hours and hours, and probably tens of thousands of the same shot again and again and again. And I think that takes a certain type of discipline and a joy in the process of becoming excellent, and realizing the journey itself is enjoyable, and there's no end state. Like, you can always be a little bit better. You can always do a little bit better. So I think that process is very similar to being an entrepreneur. You're constantly problem solving, and some days you don't want to show up, and it's really, really hard. And similar to losing a match, you may have lost a match, have a terrible match, be incredibly tired, but you pick up and you show up the next day and you hit that ball 1,000 more times. So you have to show up every day, irrespective of your highs or your lows, how you're performing, etc. And sometimes you can be in lows in a sport for not just a day or two, you can be in it for months, which is also very similar to being an entrepreneur. And I think the other side, taught me a lot of leadership, because I was in an interesting position where I was the captain of the Hong Kong team as the only non-Chinese member of that team, right? So I had to lead a team that were culturally at the time very different. Most of them didn't speak English very well. In fact, I actually had to learn some Cantonese to get through my training, to connect with my teammates. And so this entire process of inspiring and leading a team, and having to overcome a lot of different types of cultural barriers, has led to, I think, a lot of the way I learned about leadership here in building a business. And if you ask my team any day, they're probably tired of it, but they get lots of sports quotes and lots of sports inspiration and videos, because that's the way I talk about what it takes to build a successful company. I think the best language I use is sports.
Yeah, as a marathon runner, I can relate to that. I always tell an entrepreneur saying that you run your own race, you don't run somebody else's race, right?
Exactly. So marathons are a great analogy. I hats off to you. I run a few marathons, but honestly, at kilometer 30, I have lots of questions about why I'm doing it, and it's a lot of pain at kilometer 30.
Yeah. You should stop when you start this thinking like that. In fact, interestingly, one of the reasons why I continue to go to Mumbai and that heat and humidity, but still run that is because that's a great platform to also raise funds, right?
Yeah.
Which I do through them. Yeah. So coming back, one of the interesting things, entrepreneurship journey is not all about um, the wins only, right? I mean, it's a roller coaster, and I am sure both of you would have gone through that. And so I know it's a lot of times people talk about their the positive things and the successes and things like that. But actually, all of that comes depending on how you manage also the downtrends in the roller coaster, right? How well you manage it, how well you manage the team, and all of that. So can both of you, Nithya, maybe you can go first in terms of in this journey, any instance where you felt low, where something was not going according to plan, and you felt down, and how have we been able to manage it and then come out of it and actually pull the troops out also?
Many, in fact. So, like you say, we are, at least with Artium, we are building something which has no precedent. There's no benchmark that we can probably, compare ourselves with and say, okay, this is where we have to reach. So we have to break our own, benchmarks each time. So you have to set your own goal, try to break it, and on the way you find a lot of hurdles, because what you think may not necessarily be the, way it is. Because when we started this journey, we had certain thoughts in mind, okay, this is how it will be. But when you actually hit the market, when you have learners who are coming to you, you have to listen to what your customers say. So there have been a lot of alterations that we would have had to make. And that is essentially where you have to be always your ground. I mean, your ears have to be stuck to the ground in terms of what is it that is actually required. So we have made our own, small errors when we started off early in our life, and sometimes as we went along, we realized that no, this is not the whole thing. We have to change the whole structure from where we have thought of and what is it that is required. So those kind of things, dealing with and we have a lot of teachers who come from small towns, getting them trained, having them recruited. So a lot of things which are beyond our comprehension. Because I'll tell you one instance. In the initial days when we were trying to recruit teachers, now this is a very unstructured, fragmented market. Finding good talent and getting them onboarded to you itself was a big challenge, because people would not know that there is something. Because all that they knew was they could be either an academy or an institute, which is like maybe a a graduation college or something, that they could be proper teachers. Now here we are not looking at something like a graduation. We are looking at people who can deliver content in such a way and the program in such a way that the learners can become performers. So that is the journey that we define. So I mean, if I could just take 1 minute to maybe speak about the vision of Artium, that will give a better perspective. So our vision is basically to create a platform for the aspiring musicians to learn, create, and monetize. So that is the journey that we define for people who want to learn music and maybe become artists going forward. And we wanted to create a formal, very serious learning place where people could come and no hobby kind of a thing. Even if it is a hobby, of course, let us do it seriously. So to get people aligned with that vision itself in the initial days was a big challenge, which we had to schedule them, tell them this is how it is, and we had no big names associated with us those days. Then of course we have the likes of Sonu Nigam, who came in as an investor, and then of course we had the other artists also who came in. But I think the initial few days itself for us with a very small team to bring in that idea of Artium itself was a very tough thing, those days. And of course, as we go along, we have certain months where we have certain tech issues. Now, how do you solve those issues? And we have something or the other which come in, because sometimes technology, when we started with Zoom. Then we had to, of course, move into something else, because we had a lot of vision in terms of creating, widgets and features. But that movement took us a little while, and why, how, and there was a lag in technology in those days. So where learners would not be happy. And then while we were moving into the new tech, we had some issues. But yeah, I mean, somewhere or the other, building a great team which aligns with your vision and who can manage the entire thing without having, giving up is something that I believe is a must have in any entrepreneurial journey. And we've been very fortunate to have a wonderful team with us, who basically understand what is it that is needed, and they're able to. Yeah, but having said that, it's a journey of highs and lows, but that's the whole fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Hi, Akanksha. I know you've taken on a much more bigger challenge in terms of, educating people who are possibly not using technology fully, and also managed the COVID, and also managed possibly one or two pivots in terms of, getting them. So what would be your experience of, an instance where probably you went through a low and then you came out of it and took the team along?
So TCM, I mean, as you said, there have been many moments that are, rather than a low, I would say challenging. I would say COVID is a great example as one. We've made some very hard decisions in terms of taking the hit to enable certain revenue streams. And I think there's kind of three things that give me perspective through those moments or through those periods. I think the first is I zoom in, right? So again, you're going to see me use sports analogies. Now you see what I do with my team. But, I'll give you an example. The first time I played the Indian Nationals, I was the first player to play the under-16s and the under-19s on the same day. I was only 13 years old. And I wanted to take both the titles on the same day. And I was playing the under-19 finals. And I was a scrawny 13-year-old. And in squash, you play 5 sets. And I had lost the first 2 sets badly. And I was match ball down in the 3rd set. It was still 9 points. I was 8-2 down match ball. And one of the things I learned is you zoom in on that point. I was overwhelmed by the context. I was overwhelmed by the age difference. I was overwhelmed by the size difference. And in that moment, I was able to get myself to forget that it was match point, forget that I was 2 games down, and just zoom in on that point and say, okay, don't feel overwhelmed by the context. You need to get this point right. From that point, I won that set and I won in 5. And I won that match. So I think one of the key things that I've learned, again, from sports and in general in life, sometimes you feel overwhelmed and low because you're zoomed out and you're thinking about 1,000 things and this entire context that naturally will overwhelm you. So I think the first thing you can do in those moments is just zoom into that day or a certain task or a certain problem. And if you just keep doing it, eventually you realize you are moving the ball and you'll take away the feeling of being overwhelmed. So zoom in is definitely my first tactic. The second is I think I never make decisions from a position of fear. I think if I'm going to die on my sword at any point in time, I would prefer to do it based on decisions that I believed in versus looking back and saying, hey, I didn't believe that decision, but I did it because I was scared. And maybe what I really wanted to do was the right thing. And I think typically if you make decisions not from a position of fear, you'll end up in the right place. So that's something I always keep in mind when it's a difficult decision. Is like, don't let fear dictate whether this is right or wrong. No matter how scary it is, what is the real decision you want to make? And then go with that. And just, you won't have regrets that way, at least. And I think the third thing is, honestly, someone like me, I'm very privileged at this point. No one put a gun to my head and said, Akanksha, you have to start a company. And so, I remind myself, like, I have this, yes, there's a lot of ownership and accountability, but at the end of the day, I have the privilege of choosing the problem that I get to work on. I get to choose the people that I get to work with, and I get to choose my work every day. So even in the low moments, I think I remind myself of that. Like, yes, this is challenging, but you did it because you want to do something challenging, and no one put a gun to your head and said, you have to start a business and you have to solve this problem and you have to work with these people. And the vast majority of people in this world do not have that privilege. So in that context, you chose something because it's hard and it's exciting and there's big potential. So when I just center myself around that, then, you know, it's a challenge in the moment, but it's an exciting challenge that I chose. And I think that perspective makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is an area where, an interesting anecdote from last Sunday was that, somewhere near Peda Road, all of us were trying to climb the Peda Road. And then there was one lady who was holding a placard saying that, don't trip, you paid for it, paid to do this, right? So entrepreneurship, anybody who chooses to do entrepreneurship has asked for it, right? So they cannot complain.
I mean, you can feel the pain, but like the fact that you remind yourself that I chose it, and it's an amazing experience. How many people on this planet get to do this, right? Get to do this. Choose your work, choose the people you work with, and choose your problem. When you put it, it's hard, but it's fun, man. Let's go for it. Let's try and solve these problems.
Yeah, walk in that untreaded path, find your own path and make it for yourself. So I think that is the excitement that I think one derives out of being an entrepreneur, which cannot come when you work.
Yeah. So, when VCs and entrepreneurs are there, you cannot stop but talk about, let's say, fundraising, right? So, there are many others who will be wanting to start, right? And look up to you as entrepreneurs who have been there for some time and to follow in your footsteps. So what will be your advice to entrepreneurs regarding fundraising?
You want to start, Akanksha? Maybe this time you could.
Sure.
Yeah, Akanksha, the right thing that you've raised money without investment bankers also, right?
I don't know if it's because I'm smart or naive, TCM. I think it's more because I'm naive. Look, I've been fortunate to have raised a fair amount of capital to date. It's definitely harder for women, so I don't want to pretend that it's not. I think fundraising is probably for me the hardest and the least fun part of the job. I love meeting like smart investors who have similar values, but the process takes me away from building. And I'm doing this because I love building. So if I had to pick fundraising over building, it's a distraction almost. My advice would be, look, first and foremost, if you're starting a company to get rich, there are easier ways to get rich in life. So if that's your motivation versus the mission or the problem statement, like fine, like go be a banker, go join big tech. There's a million ways to make a lot of money. Building a business it's a luck of the draw, and you really are gonna take a lot longer to build and potentially financially win, but you have to be motivated by something different, by the mission and the problem. In terms of fundraising, look, I've had a unique journey. I've kind of grown up with the Indian ecosystem. When I started, it was a lot harder. There were a lot fewer investors in India and internationally. I think it's a question of being very prepared, really believing in what you do, and then knocking on 1,000 doors and finding the people who have similar values. I think over time, I've been unique, and TCM, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been unique in, especially as a female founder, I think I have a very unique cap table, a lot of first-time India investors. And I think my nature of knocking on 1,000 doors has really benefited me. I've knocked on 1,000 doors, not just in India, but globally as well. And I think the last piece of advice that I have been very deliberate about is that as hard as it is, like, you have the ability to say no to an investor that doesn't fit your values, because sometimes you're going to be in a position where you really, really need the money. Or maybe you've been fundraising for a really long time and you're not getting a close, but the wrong investor or bad investor is like a bad person on your team. Eventually they're part of your team. And in the moment, it may feel great that you got the investor, but they can genuinely take your business off track. And so I think one thing that I've been very deliberate and thoughtful about, even when it's been a bit hard, to be honest, is to find investors that really see that I want to build for the long term. So have that patience. They understand that building in India takes time. Like I believe building a successful business in India is a 10-year commitment minimum, right? So you need, as a founder, need people who are not going to say in 3 years I expect this to be crazy, because then they're going to expect you to spend a crazy amount of money. I'm very honest with my investors that like I'm not the founder that if you tell me to burn cash in 18 months, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be that founder. I'm going to take capital, think about how to build a business for the long term and spend accordingly. So, and then also like values. Who do you feel really has similar values to you? Because they are like people on your team. They're so in the business. So I think that's one strong piece of advice I would give is make sure you find people that you really want to work with for the next 10 years, because investors are there much longer than a lot of team members, right? They're there for potentially decades. So almost like a marriage, but not as much as a marriage, but close to it. Like think about, do I want to spend the next 5-10 years of my life working with this person, learning from this person? So I think that's where I've been very thoughtful. And to find these people, you have to knock on 1,000 doors. It's just a lot of person.
No, I keep telling a lot of entrepreneurs with whom I work with, saying that, look, you have a choice to decide which investor you take money from, and choose wisely, because you are going to spend 7 to 10 years with them, and which, ironically could be longer than many of the current day marriages, right? So, one has to be enjoying that journey, right? Look forward to interacting, challenging discussions with the investors, or brainstorming discussions with the investor. Otherwise, if it becomes a chore that you have to meet with your investor on a monthly basis, then I think, that's not the best thing.
Indeed.
Yes, Nithya.
Yes. So I think the first and most important thing is to have a very holistic vision for your business, and finding the right people who will be a part of the execution team. Because any business, for it to be successful, ideas could be, there everywhere. Everyone could have an idea, but then how do you put that into execution, and how do you come out a winner is something which is an essential for any business to be there. And like she said, funding of course is an integral part of any business growth story. But if you have a compulsive vision, and you have been able to demonstrate that you're able to build across that vision into execution with the right kind of people, I think it would be possible for you to reach out to the right kind of investors. But yes, the alignment in terms of the thought process, whether it is the understanding of your business, the vision that you have for your business should be shared by the investors, and then alone will it work. Otherwise it wouldn't. And given the situation that we are in currently in India, and globally, of course, there has to be a very symbiotic relationship between an investor and the investee company, which will ensure that you go along a long way, and you understand each other in terms of the problems, or the vision and the alterations that you may have to make while you executing your vision. So I think that fitment is extremely important. So we've been very fortunate, of course, to have some good investors like Chiratae also being a part of our journey, and who share the same passion that we have for music, which makes it very, very interesting for us as we go along. But yeah, you need to have a lot of patience, perseverance, and you need to knock a lot of doors to find the right kind of investor who will be the right fit for your organization. That for sure is there.
Yeah. Thanks. So one of the things, if you were to advise younger women entrepreneurs, what would be your maybe like 1 or 2 points that they should keep in mind?
Nithya, do you want to go ahead this time?
As is, I mean, you could also take it up. I'll follow you.
Sure. I think when it comes to young women entrepreneurs, I think one set of advice would be agnostic, whether you're male or female. Like I said, I think don't build a business if your objective is to enrich yourself. It's not the easiest way. The second, find a problem you deeply care about, and you care about enough that if I told you you're going to do this for 10 years of your life at least, you would be very happy and comfortable to work on that problem for a really, really long time. When it comes to women specifically, I would say just like men, but I think women maybe require a little bit of more pushing in terms of confidence. Have more confidence in yourself. You can do it, and I think find mentors and surround yourself with a village. I think I've always been very focused from a young age, for whatever reason, to find mentors, and that has served me really well. And surrounding yourself with other women and in general people who champion you will make a huge difference. Be prepared that unfortunately it is going to be harder right now because of your gender. I hope the world changes faster, but that is a reality. Be smart to deal with those. So learn from other women. What are the strategies to nullify, let's say, when your gender works against you? What have they learned in their experience to manage when that comes into play? So be very practical, acknowledge the reality, and then strategize on how to deal with that reality and solve for that reality. And I go back to kind of my initial point. If you choose to get married, I genuinely think the partner that you pick is going to make a huge difference in your success as an entrepreneur. Because if you're working against family, you're working, like, building a business is hard if every time you go home, you have an uphill battle there as well, and you don't have that support or that alignment that, these are your ambitions and the support to pursue your ambitions. It will be very hard. So I think if you're not married yet, be very, very thoughtful about the partner that you pick, because I think whether you're an entrepreneur or you choose to be, just very ambitious in the corporate world or anything, I think for women in this day and age still, your family life and your partner will have a huge influence on that trajectory. So on the personal front, I would say be very thoughtful about who you end up choosing to spend your life with, if that's something you want to do.
Absolutely. So yes, so first and foremost is, of course, I really feel that today the gap between the men and the women entrepreneurs is it's narrowing down. Women are stepping out and taking those bold decisions, and there's so many successful women out there who are inspirations to a lot many of us. Who we can follow and lead, follow them, and then they lead us, and we can of course draw out a lot of examples from them in terms of how they have built businesses. But I also believe very strongly that you have to have a lovely family, a very supportive family. In my case, of course, it is not only my husband but also my daughter and my parents and everybody, because end of the day, entrepreneurship, when you're an entrepreneur, there are no timings. It's not 9 to 5. It could be any time in the night also, where you will be required to solve a problem and you have to be at it. So there's nobody that you can delegate it to. So if you are required, you are required. So that kind of a support from the ecosystem at home is extremely important. And to have that kind of a conversation with your family, to tell them that this is needed, and get them aligned with you is very important. So that would be one piece of advice. Because having said that, there are women who are moving the path and they are actually walking the path, but there are obligations that are there. We can't say no to that. There are obligations, there are expectations from home, but then walking towards that and ensuring that you align your family and they are with you becomes very important. Otherwise you're not at peace. So that, I think, is a very important thing, that all women, or any entrepreneur for that matter, why only women, even men for that matter, need to align their families with their vision. And entrepreneurship can be absolutely draining at times, and it can be time consuming. You don't have a personal life, you can't travel. I mean, there are so many things that come up because the situations may need you to be there at that point. So that, I think, is a very big need, that you have conversations with your ecosystem and your people.
Yeah. And entrepreneurship is 25/8, but obviously one has to recharge oneself, right, during this journey. So do you have any hobbies or something? There is some place where you go get yourself re-energized, during the day, during the year. What would that be?
So for me, it is music. So I have my 5 kilometer walk every day where I am with myself. So even if I meet my friends or whoever, I don't stop by. It's just me and my music, and I do my walks. And of course, for me, I also do a lot of yoga. So that again gives me that peace in life. It calms me down. So these are the two things that help me to calm myself down from all the ups and downs that we face in this journey.
So I think somewhat similar. So I still train at least 12 hours a week. I train 90 minutes to 2 hours a day still at night. So I do think one is for me, having been in sports, I cannot imagine not training every day. It does mean honestly, there are things in the rest of my life, maybe I invest less time in and I'm happy to. So probably if I ask my friends, they're not particularly happy with my social life. Like I'm working and I'm training and then I'm with my husband. I don't have a lot of time outside of that, but those are the things I'm willing to maybe sacrifice to have the life that I really, really enjoy. So and I do think health is a competitive advantage. So I would say the two things is the most successful entrepreneurs, if I'm very honest, and if we look globally, are physically fit. Entrepreneurship, when it comes to health as well, is a physically competitive process, whether it's traveling a lot or having to work late hours, and also not falling sick, very honestly. So I think you need to take care of your health if you're really going to be a successful entrepreneur. So that's something I take very seriously. I train every night from about 8:30 to 10 p.m. or 9 to 11:30 p.m. And I train 2 to 3 hours every day on the weekend. The second thing is sleep. I think there's this entire culture of glorifying lack of sleep. I actually think, again, sleep and health are really important. So, get your, whatever is your optimal time. It could be 6 hours, it could be 7 hours, like whatever is your optimal time of sleep. You have to prioritize that because, again, an entrepreneur who cannot physically keep up with the demands of running a company and generally have the longevity to continue to do that through their life and not have illnesses and bad health is, again, very important to being a successful entrepreneur. So I think sleep is another one that is severely undervalued. But if you listen to Bezos and a lot of the people we seriously respect globally, they talk a lot about sleep and they actually don't glorify lack of sleep. A lot of them make sure they sleep actually 8 hours a day. So I think physical health and sleep and fitness contribute a lot to mental health and contribute massively to your ability to be competitive as an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah, one other question. Both of you have mentioned saying that you come from a family which has encouraged you in whatever you wanted to pursue. But have you faced discrimination otherwise in your past work life or anywhere that, and how have you been able to manage it?
I think briefly, I mean, Nithya, actually, do you want to go ahead, Nithya? This one, take one.
No, I haven't had any discrimination. Have been very fortunate to have found, a lot of support at work, and fortunate probably.
No, I would say TCM, unfortunately, I have. I would be surprised if all women haven't, so that's awesome, Nithya. But most of the women I've met have had something or the other where gender has started to play a role. I think fortunately in my nuclear family, that wasn't the case. When you come to the extended family and community, sometimes there was the case, but luckily I had my parents as a buffer who gave me the confidence to kind of pursue a very different path. I think the second thing is, unfortunately, TCM, I definitely have faced it in building a business. The reality of the numbers is there. Less than 1% of funding in India goes to women-led companies. Less than 2.3% of funding globally goes to women-led companies. I have definitely faced it in my fundraising journey. And I'm very fortunate to have, you, Chiratae, and a bunch of amazing investors that truly did not see me differently and treated me judged me basis my abilities and, my potential as a successful business builder. But that hasn't been the case in a lot of cases. And I think over time you develop tactics. Very honestly, I'm very practical about problem solving. So some of the things I have done, if women want advice, is I learned if I had a man in the room, sometimes with some investors, they would just take me more seriously. So I started doing that strategically. Why not? If it's going to help me raise, I'll do it. I started dressing a little bit. I started dressing a little differently. I hate to say this, like I lowered the cadence of my voice. I learned that from the early rounds, the nature of the way I pitch. I also learned how to deal with pushback in a way that maybe naturally I'm a quite direct person, but I've realized in the environment we're in, sometimes less progressive investors, let's say, cannot handle as bold a woman. So I've learned over time to kind of communicate in a different style that handles egos sometimes. And I'm being very blunt here. So I've learned to be like, look at the problem, find a way to solve the problem. And I mean, I've got here so far, but let's not sugarcoat it. And I think if we're more open about it, women can start to share tactics on how they have actually solved for these problems. And the second is also share the community of not just women, but men who are very different. Like you, Sudhir, the entire Chiratae team, Bloom team. Most of the people on my cap table are in fact men. There are also very few women investors out there. So they are an amazing community of men that are out there, that are allies and do believe in equality. So you got to find those allies. And so once you find them, you should also share that in the community and build that community together. And so I think that also is something that, you know, we have a community of women founders in India where we talk very openly and support each other. And it is a village, and we have a group of men that are around that as well who are very supportive and championing us. So it's been there, but I think you have to find your strategies. I think you have to share your strategies. And I think only as a village is this going to change over time.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. I come from a family where we say that if you have a girl child, you are blessed, right? And in Chiratae, we have never had to discuss gender, whether in, you know, selecting our team members or, you know, or in entrepreneurs with whom we have dealt with. It has never been this case, but, you know, I do know that there are others who have gone through this. So one of the reasons why I wanted to ask this question is also, you know, like some of the tactical solutions that you find is something that will be helpful for others as well, audience as well.
In
Thank
fact,
you,
we've
Nithya.
been
Thank you.
fortunate in Artium, we've been fortunate to have about 70% of our tutors are women, and about 55% of our team is also women. So that way, you know, we have been fortunate to have a team which is you know, which is so women centric, and so that way I've been, I think, lucky to work in an industry which has more women than men.
Sure. And thank you, Nithya. Thank you, Akanksha, for taking time to share your journey, your experiences, which hopefully, you know, the audience will find interesting and inspirational. Look forward to, you know, our journey together to create significant difference around the world. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us. Thank you.